Welcome to Under the Sun podcast. I'm Ilea.
And I'm Irene. Grab a cup of coffee and your comfiest sweats and join us every Monday as two best friends discuss everything from raising free-range gremlins to business and really everything under the sun.
Let's get started, and thanks for being here.
People always want to talk to me about my hair. There's this lady that we always see walking. She has like a Newfoundland dog. It's like a giant, like it's like a Saint Bernard. So like when we see her, it's a big deal. We're like, oh, hey, how's your dog? You know, and we pet the dog, all this stuff. And
you're so friendly.
She like finally asked me, I mean, like we've probably seen her for over a year, but she's like, so do you like dye your hair that way? No, it's just the way it is. So it's just funny because people will, I mean, like literal strangers. One time I was at like a Goodwill and somebody walked up and asked me if it was a wig. Like, is that a wig? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know you. Like, why does it even matter? Like, you're a complete stranger. Thank you. Have a great day.
Is that how you responded?
No, I just was like, nope, just the way Lord made me. I don't know. So, yeah.
So then is that a pet peeve that when people ask about your hair?
It's not. It doesn't bother me. But I do often tell my husband that it feels like I have a giant fluorescent sign on the top of my head that says like, say anything, say anything.
It's because you look gorgeous.
Oh my gosh. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yeah. It like, I don't know what just happened, but but it's gorgeous and it compliments your eyes.
Well, thanks. Yeah. It just, I feel like it gives people I mean, I've had people tell me like their entire life story and then just like walk away. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that.
That's called preacher syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, I have the preacher syndrome.
Or like priest syndrome where like people confess to you. Cause like I used to have that until I like got RBF and then people stopped doing that.
I think I have a pretty good RBF too, but apparently when I'm in public, I don't display it enough. So,
I mean, I don't know if you've had this when you were pregnant, but people just tell you their birth stories. Like they're like, oh, you're pregnant. We need to do, that's great. So here's my birth story. It was really traumatic. And I told Dave, I was like, just start paying attention to how quickly the conversation switches to like, oh, how are you? Oh, let me talk about my thing that I haven't processed yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
that's the way we do it as Americans. We just word vomit on people. We don't actually go to therapy. We just try to talk about it in public with people we don't even know.
One lady I did tell her, I was like, that sounds like something you should go work out with a therapist because like I'm not the person to talk to.
I don't need that to be part of my mindset going into birth.
No, because like I've been so intentional about like you know journaling / like you know forecasting how I want to see it to go. So good. But then sometimes it sets you a couple steps back when someone's like, oh, here's this terrible thing that happened. And good times.
Yep.
Good times.
Yeah.
Okay. Today's my favorite day ever because I have Shannon Bacus here, who is my doula. And you are also my sister-in-law's doula, and that's how we met. And you just mentioned this upstairs, and it kind of makes my armpits sweat just a little. But I'm not surprised either that apparently when we first met, I'm guessing post Nova's birth, apparently I was showing you parasite pictures.
Might have actually been while she was like in the tub.
No,
I don't think there was enough
that was
time.
Appropriate.
I just remember you were by the window.
Was that inappropriate? Was that?
No, you were not inappropriate. No. I thought it was great. I thought you were the greatest person ever. I'm like, who is this girl just coming in here? Being amazing. So,
yeah. So that's how I met Shannon was at Irene's birth or Nova's birth at the birth center in a local area. And well, I guess we can say that you're what would you say your region territory?
Sure. So I actually prefer to work in Bloomington Normal. I would say the majority of my clients are in Bloomington Normal.
Oh, so you took me out of the goodness of your heart.
I did. Yeah. I will.
I'll give you lots of snacks.
I believe it. You've fed me twice now. So the first time I refused to be on the podcast. So
well, we sat here. We sat here, remember? And we sat down here and talked for like 2 hours, and she told a bunch of
I know.
Interesting.
I'm surprised Dave didn't like creep over to the board and just start doing stuff. So, yeah.
So I guess, so before we get started on everything, do you want to start by like introducing yourself and talking about like how you got into this business and like the story behind it?
Yeah. So it's always funny when I hear people like talk about birth work as a business because I don't ever feel like it's a business. I just feel like it's what work God has given me to do right now. And so when I think about like being a doula, it's never like about the money for me. And so it's funny because like as my doula practice was unfolding, you know, my friends are like, well, you know, you need to like set this up and you need to do this. And like, oh yeah, you're an official business. And I was like, oh, I guess I am an official business. So yeah, I've been in practice for 10 years and my oldest is 11 and a half. So his birth kind of catapulted me into the birth world. I had a pretty typical first pregnancy. My sister-in-law actually was like, oh, I have this book that you need to read. She had a natural birth. They were missionaries in Kosovo. And so she had a natural birth there. And she's like, you need to read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. And I was probably, I don't know, maybe like 6 weeks pregnant, like not hardly pregnant, you know, at all. But so she gives me this book and I'm like reading the birth stories, like, holy cow, I have to do this at some point, you know? And so I read Ina May's Guide and just fell in love with the idea of giving birth to my child and shared that with my doctor. Like, hey, I'm hoping to, you know, have a natural birth, not to have medications or interventions. And she was supportive. But it was almost just kind of like, hey, we'll just kind of see when you get there. Like, we'll see.
Yeah.
And,
oh, honey. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
That's really cute.
Yeah.
But she was supportive. She was like, if you want to do that, that's totally okay. So ended up going into the hospital, had some like bleeding before any contractions or anything was starting. And I remember thinking, I actually told my husband, I was like, go get the Ina May's book. Like, see what does Ina May say about like bleeding. Yeah. He's like, honey, we just need to go to the hospital. Like Ina May doesn't say anything about bleeding. So before labor. So we went in and everything ended up being okay. My doctor checked me out, gave me an ultrasound. And she was like, oh, you're like contracting on the monitor here. And I wasn't feeling anything. So she says, we're going to keep you overnight and you'll have a baby by the morning. And I was like, oh, okay, good. That's awesome. So like, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. Well, morning rolled around and there was no baby. And so she was ready to break my water. And I was like,
and no contractions.
No
still
contractions. Not really. Like nothing like active labor contractions. Sure. So I just was kind of like, you know, she said, I'm ready to break your water. And I was like, whoa, I am not ready for that. And so that was like my first step in saying no, of like, in my type of personality, I would tell anybody no. Like, I'm not afraid to say what I think most of the time.
Which is what I love about you.
Sometimes it does depend on the crowd. But like, I knew going into it, I was like, if I break my water, this is going to go 0 to 60 in like 30 seconds, and wasn't excited about that possibility. Yeah. And I was also just like, I don't need to have my water broken, you know? So my doctor said, I'll give you an hour. You can walk around. We'll see what happens. Well, ended up, I think she was just in the office.
As if they're in charge of the timeline.
Yeah, right. Yes. Yeah. Lots of control there. Yeah. So anyway, she said, I'll give you an hour. I'll come back. Well, I think she got, you know, stuck at the office doing stuff with patients. And then I think it was maybe around 11, she finally came back and said, okay, I really think it's time to break your water. And by that point, I was like, well, I'm already here, you know, like what else is going to happen? I'm not having contractions. I'm not going to go home. So what else is there to do? So ended up breaking my water. And within an hour, I was like rocking and rolling. I was really having some good labor contractions. So labored all day. And then at 7 o'clock, there was because the nurses work 7 to 7. So that 7 o'clock nurse, I don't even remember who was in the daytime nurse, but I remember this nurse coming in and she's like, oh, we're going to get you on the peanut ball and we're going to do all these different positions. And so I tried to get up on the, like, lean over the peanut ball. Well, then my legs started having Charlie horses. And so I'm like having contractions with Charlie horses. Oh. And she was like starting to rub my legs. And I was like, no, that's making it so much more worse. Like it just like everything. Anyway. But like looking back, that was my transition time. So like I was doing a lot of work during that time. And in that time, my doctor had come back and said, well, I'm going to go home and put my kids to bed. And I was like, that's fine. I'm going to be here. Like having a baby.
I'm not going to go with you.
Yeah, right. And by 9 o'clock, I was ready to push. I was feeling the urge to push. And so, yeah, just...
So that nurse was kind of acting as your doula without like...
Yes. Okay. And I have to tell the story about this nurse because it almost makes me cry every time I think about it. So her name was Leah. And
Great
I
name.
have, I know, not Ilea, but Leah. And I only have one picture of her with my son. And it was the day after he was born. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So she was obviously very like pivotal in my birth story. Like, I don't know what would have happened if she were there, but she definitely helped me push through and like just kind of kept reminding us like this is normal. And she wasn't freaked out by the fact that I was making all these weird noises and moves and, doing different positions. So anyhow, goodness, it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a baby expo in Bloomington. And this lady like walks up and I immediately recognized her. I was like, you were at my son's birth. Like, what in the world? Like, this is insane. And she was like, oh, really? Like, where? And so I reminded her of the hospital. And she obviously, I don't think cataloged my birth. But yeah, anyway, so it just was like so crazy to meet her outside, almost like 7 years later.
That's where like she was a good nurse, because that probably means she gave everybody that consistent care of like, let's do these things so that you can have your dream birth.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a really fun connection and obviously unexpected, but like how cool to be like working like
at a birth booth.
Yeah. And like meeting people and prospective clients and things like that. And to like, my goodness, you were at my birth, 7 years ago or 8 years ago, however long.
Wow.
And then I also found out a connection that she knew my midwife as well and like had worked out of hospital settings with my midwife a long time
so midwife
ago.
Meaning like, so when you gave birth in the hospital, did a midwife end up attending?
No, so that was with a doctor.
Gotcha. And then so a midwife. So I guess I'll let you continue then.
Yeah,
so
sure.
How does that?
Yeah. So I have 3 kiddos. And so my first was born at the hospital, just had a natural labor and delivery. And after his birth, I was like, that's it. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to like serve women in this way. And then I realized I had a newborn. Like, you can't go to medical school when you have a newborn. Well, I guess people do it, but so then I started doing research and like scoured Ina May's book again. And I was like, well, maybe I'm supposed to be a midwife. And so looked into becoming a midwife. And, that's pretty rigorous too. You're going to nursing school and then you have a master's degree and you've got to do, all your clinical experience and all of that. So I was like, okay, I can't do that right now. I also still have a newborn. So what's the timeline of like, how old was he in comparison to you being like, I want to get into birth work? I mean, like 2 weeks old.
Okay. Wow.
I mean, it was like a fire lit under me.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pretty soon after that, because I realized like I didn't have a bad experience in the hospital. My doctor was great. Like, she respected what I wanted to the degree that she could. There were a couple of interventions that I was definitely like, no, like, we are not doing that. I'm sorry. We're just not doing that. And she probably thought I was crazy. We have a good relationship to this day. But
where do you think that confidence came from? Like, you were a first time mom and like you had read, was it more than just Ina May or just
literally just Ina May?
Like, where did you get that confidence? Cause like a lot of people think, oh, my doctor said it. I have to do it.
I think if it had been a more critical situation, I probably wouldn't have been so black and white. I am just a black and white thinker. So that gets me pretty far in life of just like, no, I'm not doing that. Yes, I am doing that, But I think just my personality, I've just always had that personality. I just tell it how it is. And in college, I once had, I was doing some sort of speaking thing for an evening college get together, and the guy who was introducing me said, Shannon is the most honest person that you will ever meet in your life. And I don't know, for some reason that like really labeled me of like, oh, I guess I am really honest, like people calling those things out in you. So I feel like that's one of the labels quality that I carry. Yeah. It can be dangerous though. And I've learned the dangerous side of that and being careful with words. And so I didn't have a problem saying, nope, we're not doing that. Like, for example, one intervention was right while I was pushing, I could feel that he was crowning. and they weren't able to get the fetal heart tones, right? Because your baby is like in your pelvis, coming out of your vagina.
Just wait a couple minutes.
Right there on the perineum.
Yeah.
And she said, we're not getting good heart tones. We need to put this internal monitor into the baby's head. And I was like, no, we are not doing that. Like my baby is right there. So yeah.
Is it true? Was it you who was telling me that that's like subdermal? Like, it's like a hook. It's a needle. It's an electrode that like literally is like a spring, kind of like a spring, but it screws into the top of the baby's head. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for those who are listening, it's like your baby is, crowning, and then they screw in an electrode into the baby's head.
Yes, not typically when the baby's crowning.
No,
I don't know why that special situation was.
Well, even if it's up there, it's like, I don't want you screwing anything into my kid's head.
It's because whenever you're laboring, and if you move around a lot, the monitors that they use to get baby's heart rate, they don't stay, like they're not stationary. They can move. So when those move, then you lose track of the baby's heart rate.
Yeah.
So instead of wanting to be at the bedside and maneuver those and move them around, oftentimes it's like, hey, we can't get your baby's heart rate. We need to do this intervention so we can make sure your baby's okay. Even though there's a plethora of research that shows that continuous fetal monitoring does not improve outcomes for moms or babies. So
that's what I was going to ask you, was to clarify that, but that was great.
Yes. Intermittent auscultation. So listening regularly, intermittently to the baby has been, shown to be just as effective as, or even better than listening, continuously.
I've even had friends who were like, I'm fine with the monitor, but I want a wireless one so that I can walk around and move. And they're like, well, we can't do that because they're not as accurate. And
why are they on the market?
Well, that's a really great question. And also like moms need to like move and work with the baby to get it down. Like
that's the number one thing in labor is movement. So
So, okay. So then you had your son, you met her at the expo. Well, that was 8 years later.
Yeah, that was 8 years later. So then I was like, deciding what are my next steps? Obviously you still have a newborn. So we kind of limped through that first year. I had a lot of breastfeeding struggles, and actually my son had breastfeeding struggles, and I ended up pumping for like 8 months after he turned like 4 months old. I pumped for 8 months exclusively for him, and was working during that time. So it wasn't like full on head on, like I'm a birth worker, but like doing my research, what organization could I go with, and figuring out, what organization my priorities and my goals would align with. So probably when he was 1.5 years, I took my doula training, and then 2 weeks later attended my first birth. So yeah. And I attended 3 births pretty quickly in a row. So they were 2 May births and a June birth. So this May is my 10th year in practice. I just am like, it's so good. And to think of all the women and families that I've gotten to meet, and, people like you build a relationship with.
You're welcome.
So, thank you.
How many births do you know, like how in the last 10 years?
Yeah, because I'm type A and I keep track of everything. Yeah. So, I have done, I should say up until like 2021,
right.
Probably like 225 or more births.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
that I've
awesome.
been able to be a part of. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So,
okay. So for the people who don't know, cause I've had like, I am pregnant.
Yes.
I'm very pregnant, 38 weeks, 39 weeks coming up. And cause that's, the next week. I have had people ask me like, okay, what are you doing? What's happening? I'm like, well, I have a midwife and I have a doula. And they're like, what do they do? And so will you explain what a doula is and what you do?
That's a great question. So, I do not have an elevator speech for this.
That's okay.
And I've been doing it for 10 years.
What?
It's so hard.
It's our podcast. It's our room. We can take as long as you need.
Do whatever.
Yeah.
I always have a hard time making my job description into this little tiny capsule, because sometimes it looks like, I don't know, making a meal while people are in labor. Sometimes it looks like wiping somebody's butt while they're in labor.
I hope you don't have to wipe my butt.
I probably will. We're going to get there. We'll be there.
I don't know that I want that.
Just the other day, I helped a mama apply hemorrhoid cream. So there are just, I mean, it's like, you know, when people ask me, you know, well, why should we hire you? Or what is something that makes you stand apart from, you know, other doulas? I'm just always like, I don't know, like, you make the decision. I don't know. So my biggest thing as a doula, you know, I'm not there to do any sort of medical tasks. So I'm not listening to the baby. I'm not checking your cervix. I'm not delivering your baby under any circumstance. So
because the mom delivers the baby.
The mom delivers the baby. But, you know, even if we were to be laboring at home and your midwife's not here yet, but all of a sudden you're pushing on the toilet, I'm going to say, hey, Dave, you know, heads up, here comes your baby.
Yeah.
And you guys can deliver your baby. So I don't deliver babies under any circumstance. And I'm there for physical, emotional support during the labor. I always feel like the bulk of my work, I mean, yeah, I'm probably spending 20 hours with people, right? From the beginning of their labor till, you know, when they deliver, and a little bit of postpartum care. But the bulk of my job is done prenatally. So like educating and having, you know, Zoom calls and talking on the phone and texting. And, you know, you've seen my website. I've got like a million resources to look through. So my job as a doula is to always support whatever the family wants. Whether it would be something that I choose, you know, that I would choose for myself, that is not even something that's on the table. Yeah. My job is to support the family. So I've had families that hire me. They want to get an epidural, or they want to have a repeat C-section, or they want to have a home birth, you know, and they want to deliver their baby in the water. So that's my job, is to support them, help educate them so that they know what their options are. Because, you know, I don't remember who the quote is from, but when you don't know your options, you don't have any. So that's one of my primary roles as a doula. And a lot of times those things come up in labor. You know, people are kind of forced to make these heated decisions in the moment. And I can just kind of be a pause button there and say like, hey, everything's okay. Like you have an hour or 2 hours, or sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it is like, you need to make a decision within 30 seconds. Like this is a hard call, but
well, you also
being there in those moments.
Ask really great questions prior to birth that like force you to think about specific situations, and like which is half the battle. Cause I feel like sometimes when you go the traditional medical route, it's just like, oh, like we'll just, you know, we'll see how it goes. And if you go over, we'll induce you.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well, that's not really educated, like informed consent. It's just like, let us manage the situation instead of like educating the parents about like what their options are. And that's huge.
Yep.
And like, and also having you there, because I got to watch you firsthand with Irene.
And her birth went really quickly. I mean, she was working by herself for a long time, like overnight, all night.
Nobody. I need to have her on, and I would love to have you on post her birth.
Okay.
Because I'm an oversharer, and I'm like, tell me,
let's do it.
All the things.
Dave will have to join us.
Yeah. We'll have a whole panel of the people who were
talking about this baby's birth story. Yeah.
Well, and I talked to Brandy, my midwife, about, I was like, come on the podcast. She was like, oh no. Yeah. I was like, okay, you don't have to.
Love Brandy.
But she's precious. I love her. But like so Irene was in labor, and we'll have her talk about it at some point. But I remember like you were in the bathroom with her, and I didn't know this until a little while ago that like if you wouldn't have encouraged her, she probably wouldn't have left for a while, because she didn't even realize she was that far along. And so it's like your years of experience of watching women labor that you just know, you see things, and you know things that like that we, like the average person who doesn't watch birth every single day. Like literally I can just roll out of bed, have my eyes, my ears, my hands, and I'm good to go. Like, I'll get dressed too. But you know, that's really all I need. I carry this crazy big birth bag around, but very rarely do I take tools out of it to help, you know, sometimes clary sage, you know, to help stimulate contractions if mom needs help with that, or peppermint if somebody's nauseous. I didn't know clary sage did that. It does. So don't be using it yet. No.
Not till the photographer's back in town.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be fine.
Yeah.
It would be like, I mean, we have other cameras, obviously.
You have enough cameras here that we could handle
but it would be nice if like, Dave and Irene could be present. Or we'll just hand you a camera and we'll be like, here's the settings.
I would love
and then you
to
can add it to your, you already do birth photos.
We should get together on that too.
Okay.
And figure out how do I edit these? Because I have a DSLR.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to use it. So it just gets used on automatic.
Yeah.
So, anyhow.
I can teach you.
That's neither here nor there. I know you're going to teach me so many things. I love it.
I just love when I I love you. And I'm like, I want. Yeah.
I know. I have ideas for you too, but you're about to have a baby. So we'll have to hash those out.
Well, I'll tell tell me all the ideas.
Okay.
Maybe not right now, but later.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Yeah. So let's back up then. Okay. You had your first birth and then you took your doula certification, went to 3 births.
Yep.
How long did it take for you to get fully into doula work? And then when did your second and third kid come and how did those look?
Yep. So the first probably 5 years of my doula work, so half the time I've been a doula, was very slow. I would take maybe 3 or 4 clients a year.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So, I mean, I had very little kids. I had 2, under 3 for a long time.
Yeah.
And then between my second and my third, I had a little bit bigger of a gap. And that's kind of really when things started to take off. And I was able to take on more clients and I was getting clients that I didn't know. So at first, when people approach me and say, oh, tell me how to become a doula, or like, how can I get into this work? Often I'm telling them like, it's really a slow start because you have to have relationships with people and not everybody's pregnant all the time. So the way you get into it is you have to be bold and you have to be brave and say, hey, friend from church or a friend from wherever, I see you're pregnant. Can I be your doula? Like literally that's how I first got, clients. So the first was a gal from my church and she was Bulgarian and her husband was American. So that was fun to work with them. Like they were really great and to get to know them. And that baby is now, 10 years old. So that's really fun. And the second was my cousin. Oh my goodness. That was so great. Like I remember when she came home from the hospital, like I held her and I remembered like holding this baby. And now I'm like here holding her in labor.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool experience. And then those were both hospital births. Cool story too is
I love all the stories.
With the first birth I ever attended as a doula was with the physician that delivered my first.
Really?
So it was like a full circle moment of like, oh my goodness, like this is just all serendipitous coming together. And
wow. That's kind of phenomenal that a physician would like that hired a doula. Like that's awesome.
Well, the physician wasn't giving birth. The physician was, the doctor for the client.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. So, it was amazing. It was really great. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then the third birth was a home birth for another friend. She was actually in our small group and was having her second baby. And she actually asked me like, hey, would you be my doula? And I said, of course, I would be your doula. And then from there, I just, people would approach me like, hey, would you be my doula? And at first I just started off on donation base. So like whatever you think I'm worth, like that's what you can give me and I will come to your birth. So if that is a photo session, then okay, I'm coming to your birth and you take pictures of my kids or whatever it is,
Sure.
So did that for a while. And then, wow, when you get into birth work, you don't realize what a sacrifice it is. It's hard work. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your family. And so at that point, it was almost like, okay, I need to start charging something because I'm giving so much that my family, I have to pay for childcare. I have, 2-3 little kiddos that need care. And so.
And you have to go at any hour of like the night. And
really, truly.
I can't imagine like even tonight. So you were going to come over at like 6:30 and you're like, hey, I'm at a birth. So it might be a little while longer. And then you're like, oh, I'm done. Went really quick. And now I'll be there at 7:30. And I'm like, okay, like it's just What a big question mark on your calendar.
Yes.
All the time.
All the time. Mm-hmm.
How does that work with your type A personality?
You know, over
you
the
said
years,
type A.
Yeah, but seriously, over the years, I think it has taught me a lot of life lessons of like, okay, well, I missed my son's second birthday. Like I was laboring with the family all day, you know, and that was that baby's birthday too. So there have been, or like Christmas or Easter, I've had almost every holiday. Valentine's Day, Christmas, trying to think all the, you know, Easter. So all of the important holidays, we've had babies. Mother's Day. Yeah, that was last year, Mother's Day baby. So it is really cool to like be with people. But as I have grown my practice, I've also realized my boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So there's a portion of the year where I don't take very many clients. I mean, it's like, you have to basically beg me to come to your birth because my husband's not available. And so he is working hard. And so my role during that time is really to be home and to be present and to be available to my kids. So, so there are just things that I have learned throughout the seasons of the ebbs and flows of life. And just figured out what's worked for our family. So
then you've been a doula for 10 years and you've seen everything from hospital birth to birth center to home. Like when we talk about this, I feel like you and I talk about home birth, like because that's what we talk about, or birth center. We've had those conversations. A lot of people at home and who are listening to this are like home birth and their brain goes red flag, unsafe. So can you talk me through actually how normal and physiological it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to have 2 hospital births in order to be comfortable to have a home birth. So I had been to home births before I even had my second baby, but still wasn't comfortable enough to have a home birth yet. I actually reached out to Brandy when I was pregnant with my second. And it was one of those things where I just like couldn't make that choice because what if, you know, my type A, like taking all these things and breaking it down and worrying about all the little things. So, with our third, my husband actually was like, we're going to have a home birth because you've had 2 normal vaginal births in the hospital. Like we don't need to go to the hospital. Like that's not something we need at this point. So, I mean, if you are high risk, so I would say home birth, right, is appropriate for low risk women. If you are a high risk woman, home birth is not the setting for you. But if you're a low risk woman wanting an unmedicated, we do not do epidurals at home births. We don't do C-sections at home births. But if you are a low risk woman wanting a natural, physiologic, unmedicated birth, then home is the place for you. If you have a provider who is there to equip you and to support you and to help you, you know, have the birth that you want. So
I guess you've probably seen, you've seen it all of the whole spectrum of, so then at like a birth center or at a hospital, like how was that, how how do you help support like in the hospital setting? And just because that's something I've never seen.
So I feel like my role is the same no matter what the location is, right?
Amazing.
So I'm doing double hip squeezes at the hospital and at the birth center and at home. I'm still giving everybody those same options and choices at the hospital, the birth center, and home. So a lot doesn't really change with my role at the physical location. What does change is the environment, right? So there are some hospitals that I just don't go to anymore because it puts my client at risk for discrimination and bias. And so
because of you or because of?
It's mostly the idea of a doula. It's not me.
Right.
So it's the idea that this one particular nurse or this one particular physician has had a bad experience with a doula in the past. And that bias makes them like have this brick wall up, you know. I had an experience at a local hospital recently and the nurse was just like having a hard time, like just couldn't understand what my role was. And so I just kind of like said like, hey, like, how can I help, you know, lighten the mood here a little bit? And she basically just confessed. She's like, well, we've had doulas before that, the patient will not make any decisions unless the doula tells her what to do and, tells her yada, 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 things like that. And I'm like, wow, that doula did not do her job very well. I said, I am not here to make any decisions for them. I'm here to support them. And even just like, as like to have a perspective of, like they've paid me a lot of money to be here with them and help support them to have the birth that they want. Yeah, I don't know. So there are certain hospitals that I just don't go to because I feel like the culture is not healthy enough for doulas to adequately provide the support. So, but our local birth center is amazing. Home births are amazing. Most of the local hospitals are great, but there are just some that I'm like, wow, I've worked with that provider before. And maybe it was a bad day. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what they dealt with in their day. Right. So everybody's human. I always approach people like, yep, you poop. Like you poop too. Yeah. So I just always try to like humble myself in the fact that like, everybody is a human. Everybody can make mistakes. So, but
we're all kind of just faking it anyways.
We're all just faking it until we make it. Yes. Yeah. And I think that just for my client's sake, it's like, I don't want to put them in a situation where they feel pressured or coerced because they have hired a doula to help them prepare for this, this birth. So
there's a story I heard on another podcast that she said, she was like, it was the host. She was like, I wanted to hire a doula. And she said, the doula said, hey, just check with this hospital because I've never been there before. And so when she went to her next appointment, she was like, hey, I'm thinking about hiring this doula to come in. Do you mind? And the provider's response was, yes, but you just got to make sure she knows who's in charge. And so, and then when she left, it sent no red flags to the mom. And she said she, left the appointment and called her doula and was like, hey, yeah, she said, just as long as you remember who's in charge. And she was like, well, of course I will. You are. And then she was like, it flipped a switch in her mind of like, oh, I'm in charge of this process. Like there's always room for the question mark, but also like just general education and being informed and knowing that you are the one that's in charge is, and then having someone who knows your preferences,
what you want,
and can advocate for you if you're, busy contracting.
You're not just a number in the system at that point.
Yeah. So you're, love you. So excited. Okay. So I can't not ask because we did have a whole long, I wish we would have recorded it.
You should have.
We should have.
Dave, did you record us? No, he says no.
No. But, you've been in birth work for 10 years. So I'm sure you've seen some amazing things. Is there like one amazing birth that stands out and one like either something just wow, doesn't have to be about birth or like, whatever you want.
So
share to your comfort level and keep names out.
There was this one birth. It was actually at the birth center. And the mom had asked her sister-in-law to be at the birth. And she, she was pretty quiet. She wasn't like off the wall or anything. But, as the birth progressed, we just kind of were chatting back and forth. And then after the baby was born, she started telling me about how she was doing these like cleanses and like.
Was it me? Oh my God.
You were so serious. Oh my gosh. I love that. Oh, I love that. She showed me pictures of her poop and all the parasites. And I totally.
And yet you still haven't done a parasite cleanse?
No, I'm scared of what would come out of my body.
Yeah.
Scared of it.
Why? Yeah. Just imagine your esophagus thing might go away.
It could just be a giant parasite going on in there.
It could be. Yeah. I mean, they cause inflammation. Yeah. So, man, I was like, where's this going?
You were on
and then I was like, wait a minute.
So, I don't know. I'll just talk about my most recent birth because I probably will cry because when I think about like what women endure in childbirth is just incredible. Like the power that moves through their body is so insane and so intense. So, this mama, she had 2 hospital births and this was her 3rd home birth. And she was just, labor came on fast and furious. She just was not getting a break. And she was like starting to lose herself. Like she could feel it. Like she was saying to me, Shannon, I need you to do something. Like I need some help somehow. So I just got down on her level and breathed with her through every contraction and like the intensity of her gaze into my eyes. Like she was like, I don't know what I would have done if you wouldn't have been there to like just breathe with me and look me in the eye and tell me that I'm going to make it and be okay. And then when she started pushing, she was actually like holding onto my body and I could just feel the power moving through her body. So I would say that that's probably one of the most recent, like, that birth is just amazing. So, and I will tell you that was a home birth and it didn't wrap up with a pretty little bow. Like not every home birth does. Most do, but some don't, but it didn't negate the beauty of her birth. So
what a connection to like, you know, like they have the exercise that they say, like if you're having trouble connecting with your spouse, just sit there for 3 minutes and look in their eyes. Yeah. Because we realize that we don't, like I look away all the time and we like, we're just as humans, we culture. Do it, but also to be able to like breathe and make eye contact. And I don't know, it's like something spiritual to like on a spiritual level of connection that like you almost can't put into words.
Well, and if I hadn't have built that relationship with them, you know, over 8 months, 9 months of connection and asking questions and all the texts and phone calls and, you know, follow-ups from appointments and things like that, maybe she would have really felt lost or felt unsafe or
not good to ask, like not comfortable to ask.
Right. Yeah. So there are just little niches that doulas fill that I am well aware of. Like when I get down to like the nitty gritty of it, I'm like, this work matters. Right. But on the hard days, on the days where I've been up for, you know, 48 hours and I haven't eaten real food, which thank you for feeding me today.
Anytime.
I just came from a birth. So, you know, just things like that. I do often ask myself, like, is it worth it? Like I will ask my husband, you know, like, why do I even do this? Or, you know, threatening, like, I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to be done. But I think that's human nature, right? When you feel down and depressed and I mean, I don't feel depressed about my work, but when you just feel like, the weight,
the heaviness of it,
the world. And then, you know, when births don't have the outcomes that maybe the mom or the dad expected, you know, those are really hard. So in birth, you have really high highs and you have really low lows. And I've been through both of those with people, you know, so.
Because you have probably heard them speak from the beginning about how they saw it going and you know, probably the disappointment and probably see it right then and there of if things don't go to plan. So like that's, it would be hard not to, that's why I got out of the medical field because like I couldn't manage. Like it does take a special person to be in your position or to be a nurse or to be like a midwife or even an obstetrician. It's just, it takes a special person because you can like, I was well aware that in that setting, I was like, I'm taking on everyone else's emotions and like, I'm not able to like put a wall up. So that's why I got out of it. And now I'm into filming and podcasting.
I love it. Look at this. Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. But so, okay. So then do you have a wild story?
Oh, a wild story. Oh man.
You don't have to.
About it. I'll have to think about it and maybe come back to it. I thought of one upstairs. I was like, oh yeah, I could share that one.
I don't remember.
But it's not coming to my brain. So
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. What would you say to a mom who is like, maybe she just found out she's pregnant and like, what is the advice that you would give to any mom who's just...
My number one advice is to read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. It doesn't matter what type of birth you think you want. Ina May's perspective on the physiology of birth will change your brain forever. Like it just will. And you will hear her words as you are giving birth. So it doesn't matter how you end up giving birth. Like you will hear Ina May's voice in your head. So that's my number one recommendation to pregnant women is read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. And I joke with people when they interview me, you know, I say like, well, it's not just recommended reading, it's required reading. You have to read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth if you want to hire me as your doula.
That's amazing.
So
it's good. I actually started over and went back through the birth stories because like I've run out of podcasts of ones that.
So for the listeners, if they are going to get, you know, you can get it on loan from your library. If you don't want to buy it, you can get it on Amazon, audiobook, all these different ways you can access it.
Well, and Shannon has an Amazon link. So like we'll put it all in the description of like your website and where like basically like recommendations of where what I suggest. What you suggest.
What I recommend. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's you have been there. You've been in the thick of it. So like and your opinion is so very important. Because as first time moms, so you can get overwhelmed with the book recommendations and the
I did a postpartum visit on Saturday for another mama that had a home birth on 2 weeks ago. It doesn't matter. Anyhow, so she had this really cool basket and she could like fit her drink cup in it and she could put like diapers in it and whatever else she wanted, like nipple cream or butt cream for the baby, a couple different like outfits and burp cloths. Anyhow, so I was like, oh, I got to put that on the list because it was like perfect. She's like, yeah, I just fill it up in the morning. When I get up in the morning, I'll put a couple outfits in there, restock the diapers and wipes and, fill up my water cup so that when I'm sitting down nursing, I've got, adequate hydration. So yeah, I was like, that's on the list.
That's awesome. See, I have a basket, like it's like a 3-tiered basket. And the top one is all like boob stuff, pads, nipple creams, all this stuff. And then it's snacks in the next one.
That's perfect.
And then the cup will fit on top.
Yeah. I love that.
So
the nursing station.
Yeah. It's all of my adult diapers, which I joke because it'll be a great memory. Well, it's just a great memory because I'm like, I went to go, I've never purchased adult diapers before in my life. So went to the Kroger and purchased adult diapers. But then while I was there, my husband, Dave, say hi, Dave.
Do I have to talk about diapers?
No, you just have to admit that he called me while I was there and was like, can you grab me a bottle of wine like while you're there? So like I was just there buying diapers, like Depends and wine. And so it's like
and very pregnant.
Very pregnant.
And I was like, it's either a bender or like what's happening here? So that's my
got to keep them hopping and guessing. You can't just show all your cards.
I did get a look from the self-checkout lady because I had shame and I went to self-checkout to try to hide it.
That is amazing.
It's rare that I get embarrassed. Sure. I was embarrassed.
By the way, just for the record,
this over here.
Yeah.
For the record, I did say never mind. This sounds like a bad idea. This sounds like a shameful experience. Really? So let's not. And you're like, no, I don't care what people think. I'm just gonna grab this wine.
Okay. Well, I was like,
that's amazing.
I feel ridiculous because like a goober, I didn't grab like a cart or a basket. I just was holding my diaper and my wine and my Snoop Dogg wine.
Ooh, you go for the Snoop Dogg, huh?
Yeah.
We spare no expense here.
Yeah. Snoop Dogg 19 Crimes.
Yeah. Wow.
It's good. Have you tried it?
Mm-mm. I will though. Next time.
Is that going to go on your list? Like your affiliate
going on my list.
No, it'll go on your thank you. Thanks for being here for the birth.
Oh, yes.
19.
I only accept wine as tips.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Okay.
That would be hilarious. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to ask? Because you're coming from a different perspective, Dave.
Dad using a doula. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great question. No, not offhand. Probably if I thought about it for a second, but
yeah. Well, what's great is, like you do a whole like birth course, right? Like so you not only worked with Irene, my friend, but also I was working with a chiropractor, Dr. Lauren Jordan, who also used you as a doula and didn't know that until after the fact.
I also had to force her to go to the birth center. Yeah.
When because she was in denial. What's up with these girls being in denial?
They're just so strong and so focused and ready to do it. Seriously.
That's great.
Yes. Yeah.
So then what is your protocol of like, hey, mom doesn't seem to like, is it that they don't know? Is it denial?
So I think sometimes it's just that they are so in the rhythm, right? So like when you're laboring, you get outside of your thinking brain. You have to, because otherwise I feel like we would spontaneously combust because there's just so much going on at the time of birth. But I think that for moms that are really focused and really sure about what they want, they just get in this rhythm and ritual and they do their thing. So I remember in her case, she had like told me in the morning, sorry, Lauren, if I'm misremembering this, but I think that morning she had said like, hey, I think some things are going on. And I was like, it's fine. Go to work. You'll be fine. So
she's a chiropractor.
Yeah. It's fine. Just go adjust people all day. It'll be good. But being a first time mom, I'm like, this can last for days. So don't stop your life. That's kind of one of the things that I teach people is when you have your first contraction that you think is your first contraction, be prepared for 48 hours of work because it is going to be a long ride. Yeah. For some people, it's not. So Lauren is one of those people that...
lucky girl.
Yeah. So it was then in the early afternoon, like maybe 2 or 3, her husband calls me. And every time the husband calls, are you listening, Dave? I'm like, oh crap, I got to get this right now. So, I answer the phone. And he's like, yeah, man, she's like on the floor and like won't get up and she's breathing really hard. And man, it just seems like she's having like one long contraction. And I said, okay, you need to get her up off the floor, get her in the car, and I'm going to meet you at the birth center because she's going to have a baby. And we were at the birth center for maybe an hour. So
okay,
it was very quick.
I can picture Dean, her husband, just being like,
yes.
So
yeah, he was very concerned because he was like, she will not get up. She will not do what I'm asking her to do. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to get her in the car and I'll meet you at the birth center. So yeah. And same with Irene. Like I can just hear like, it's so interesting, the skills that I bring into the birth room versus what the medical system has to offer, right? So they can be complementary if the culture is there to integrate it. Oftentimes it's not. I do work with several colleagues who, they respect my opinion. They ask me what I think. They want to know like, hey, what should we do in this situation? And so there is some of that collaboration that happens. So an example, I was at one of our local hospitals a few weeks ago. She was an April mama that delivered and the mom was going through transition. So she was like ready almost to push and she was falling asleep in between contractions. And the nurse like looked at me and was like, is this okay? Like, what is happening? Like, why is she doing that? And I'm like, oh yeah, this is totally normal. Like this is her body preparing to push this baby out. Yeah. And she was just like, wow, you know so much about like the birth process. And I'm not saying this to like pump myself up. I'm just saying
you
like,
should be pumping yourself up.
No, I shouldn't because I go into birth thinking I don't know anything. Oftentimes I'm like, who am I? Like, who do I even think I am? Like going to support
imposter syndrome.
Seriously. But it also keeps me humble because I really am there just to serve the family. Like I don't really care what the provider thinks. I don't really care what the nurse thinks. I'm not there to impress anybody, but to serve the family. So anyway, yeah, just that experience with that nurse of, her saying like, wow, I could just follow you around. She was like, I could just follow you around for a week to learn from you. And I was like, well, I could follow you around for a week and learn from you. So that's the kind of like collaboration that I think our system would so much benefit from because there are things that I can't do. I'm not listening to fetal heart tones. I'm not checking a cervix. What I was going to say is, she was like, well, maybe we should check her. Like, should we check her? And I was like, oh no, like she's fully dilated. She's going to start pushing soon. And she like, her eyes just got really big. Like, how do you even know that? I'm like, I'm just listening to her. I'm looking at her body. I'm not looking at a screen. I'm not having to do the things that she's doing, on the medical side of things. So, yeah. But
what a skill.
Those skills, I didn't start out that way as a doula, but over the years, I can be in the other room and hear it change and like, okay, there she goes. She's about ready to push. So I'll give Dave the look whenever that happens for you. So, yeah.
So speaking of Dave, I have a question.
Speaking of Dave, speaking of that guy,
I thought of my question on behalf of myself as a very, very near father.
Yes.
The role that you play with moms that are birthing is super cool. How does that interplay with dads, during that time? Like what does that ideal relationship look like for you? When you have, you may have mom who's obviously giving birth and doing her thing, and you've got to, pay attention to her, but like dad is present. What does that look like?
Because he, I think, wants to be like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but our vision is that like he's very much like a part of it. He's not like a dad who's like watching football in the other room. Like, I don't think I've ever even seen him watch football, but like.
And I expect part of your answer is probably going to be that it depends on what mom and dad want. Right?
It does. I've had some dads that sit in the corner and like literally just stare at their phone the entire labor. I've had dads that, I'm like, oh man, you're really good at that. I'm like learning some new things. Just opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think my role with dads is more of equipping you. So I'm not really good at we've done some practice comfort measures, right? Like I taught you the double hip squeeze and how
we do them like every night.
Yeah. Cause it feels so good.
It's so
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sacral pressure and, shaking the apple tree, things like that. So that's kind of my job to prepare you with that prenatally. But then once Ilea's in labor, you're going to not remember anything that I taught you. You're going to your brain's just going to be mush because you love her so much. You just want to be with her. So that's my job then, to come in and do some of those double hip squeezes, and then all of a sudden Dave's like, hey, can I do that? So that's how I do it in my practice. I am more of like, I'm going to set the tone. I'm going to lower my voice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get down on mom's level. And so a lot of times dads don't know how to do that, right? Because our culture has taught men not to be soft. But moms have to be super soft in labor. So that's how I lead in labor. I'm never like, Dave, get your butt over here and, do X, Y, or Z. But yeah, just by...
You can, by the way.
Just by example. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Feel free to do that. Mm-hmm. No, that's a great answer. Because I think that men probably especially, but anybody in that sort of just uncontrolled, very rare experience, I have to think is they're going to go like full lizard brain and not really think and just react probably poorly. And so to have somebody there who has done this
to guide you,
to guide the family. I mean, you literally,
and to look at her and be like, she's not panicking. Like,
right.
Like, that's why you look to the doula and the midwife.
If I panic, run. No, we're just kidding. I have had a lot of dads that just said like, I felt so, I don't know the right word, like stripped of power or stripped of control, or like I didn't know how to take care of my wife, but you showed me what I could do. And that made me feel more a part of the experience. So I had a 4th-time mom who hadn't delivered naturally. And she was like, no, I'm going to have this experience and I'm going to have a natural birth. And the family just at our postpartum visit, we always talk about how the birth went. Like, what did you think about it? What were your expectations? How are you feeling about it? How are you processing it? And that was one of the things that they talked about, was how much it brought them together as a couple. Like they said it did something like on a chemical level of like connecting them in a way that they've never been connected before. And those are the reasons that keep me coming back to birth work. So
that's amazing. I feel like even us, just like, we haven't even done it yet. Like, but being in communication pretty much daily at this point, because it's the thing we're waiting on. Yeah. And it's great because I'm also very fortunate that I have like a partner who is very interested in learning everything about it. Like, not just like, oh yeah, whatever you think, you're having it. So just whatever you think is best. But he's very engaged in wanting to know all the things. And so I don't know. I think it'll be a champ. Plus, like I always like walk up with Instagram videos and I'm like, look at this baby being born. And now he doesn't even react. She's like, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting. She's on her back. I never thought
You've normalized it. You've normalized it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for I mean, for a very, very long period of time, I think men were sort of pushed out of the experience.
Yeah. They still are.
And
not physically, but like they're not part of the decision-making process.
Kind of like condemned to the chair in the corner of the hospital room where, interesting.
Well, and so to my wife's credit, she has definitely pulled me in, over and over. And very much made me a part of the process, which has really been wonderful. And so, for both of us to kind of take ownership, and, to educate ourselves and learn about it. I mean, that's been really empowering, I think, for both of us, and it has brought us together.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because there's something when you both have that same goal in mind, but we have also the bizarre, relationship that maybe a lot of couples don't have, where we have ran businesses together, and like we kind of see this as like, and we've been in like high pressure performances where we're about to, like, both of us are about to go walk out on stage and perform in front of 10,000 people, and we've had like that adrenaline and that like pressure.
I'd be sweating.
We know you'd be sweating, but like we were sweating too. But like we've been in, and obviously it's totally different, but like. We've had to make tough decisions. We've had to do these things. So like, it's a different way to work together, but it's also,
you have those skills, you've worked on those gears run.
Yeah. But
it's fun to be applying it in this way. Yeah. Of bringing a human into the world.
Yeah. And I'm like, plus you helped made it. Like, you got to be involved. Like,
that's right. You are stuck.
Yeah. I was like, if I see you on your phone, you're donezo.
So help me.
Yeah, you're donezo. But okay. Any parting thoughts or things you'd like to bring up? Or
that's a good question. I think, in America, birth is so medicalized, right? So we have to think about, birth has only been happening in a hospital medicalized system for the last 110 years. Before that, home birth was it. Yeah. Like, that's what you did. And so, even our grandparents potentially, were born at home. And just thinking how different it is for people in our culture when you tell them like, hey, I'm having a home birth. Like, you're doing what? Like, why would you do that? We're delivering at a birth center. Anything that's outside the norm, I think, stresses people out. Well, what if something goes wrong? Well, that's why you have a midwife there. That's why you have medications at your home birth. That's why you have, a midwife at your home birth, things that you need there to do home birth safely. So I think the main thing is, if your goal in childbirth is to have a physiologic, normal, natural birth, make sure that your provider and your place of birth know what their statistics are. What is your provider's episiotomy rate? What's your provider's C-section rate? Don't even look at the facility. I mean, look at the facility rate, but look at your provider's, C-section rate. What kind of body language happens when you talk to your doctor or your midwife about wanting to have a natural, normal, physiologic birth? Just read the room. If you're getting red flags, change providers. It's not hard.
Yeah.
It's really not hard. So I can guarantee you that if you're having red flags prenatally, if you are having hesitations or you're not sure that you're going to be well supported during your birth, you won't be. And if you're having those thoughts and you're not in labor, you're not in the greatest pain that you'll ever experience in your life, you're not physically, emotionally, spiritually under pressure, you're not going to be able to fight that battle when you are. And so that's my main thing. Like, make sure you are confident in your provider and your place of birth. I think the other thing too is stay off your back and stay out of the bed. So whether you're at home or a birth center or the hospital, if you don't want to be checked very often, or maybe you do want to be checked, or for pushing positions, it's just like, stay off of your back and stay out of the bed. Our pelvises were not meant. I actually was listening to a podcast today where they were talking about stirrups and how there's new research coming out about how detrimental that actually can be for the pelvis and for like nerve damage if the woman's legs are left in the stirrups for too long or positioned incorrectly. So
send me that podcast.
So new research is coming out and it's like, okay, well, we have used stirrups for decades, right? And now we're just realizing like, oh, maybe that's not the only way to give birth. So the other thing I would say, this will be the last thing and then I'll sign out, but, be okay with confrontation. If you are in the medical system, you really are a number. And I don't say that as like a negative, like dock point against physicians. Yes, physicians are compassionate.
They have their place.
They do. Yes. And when you have a system, like you have to have a way to control all the things that could happen. Right. So we have algorithms and we have flow charts and they're
statistics.
Yes. And that's how birth has to be controlled in that system. But when you know what you want, say what you want. Like you can say no. It's your legal right to tell someone no. And so don't have this fear in the back of your mind of, oh, if I tell my doctor no, they're not going to like me or they're not going to, do X, Y, or Z. Like, no, that is not a thing. Like they probably won't remember you next week. Like, and they might, it's not one of those things where
they'll remember if you don't comply with everything they say, like they'll probably remember.
Sure. Yes. It does put imprints, on doctors' minds or midwives' minds whenever the patient isn't super compliant, but it's your birth and you have to deal with either the consequences or the victory of that birth for the rest of your life. And you'll always remember that birth. So do it the way you want to do it in a safe way, right? In a healthy way. We want people to be safe and healthy. So
someone, I can't remember who said it, but someone was advocating for like, hey, if your doctor isn't listening to you and like it was a specific story that I'm not recalling all of the pieces, but she was like 35 weeks along and they were already trying to talk about induction. She's like, and it was all sudden, even though she wanted to have a natural birth. But she made like the argument. She's like, I want a good outcome. She's like, it's my baby. Sure. It's like, I've grown it for the last 9 months. Like it's not that I'm just being like aggressive about it. It's like, I'm trying to do like, use my discernment of like, there's something, on a spiritual level that like, we know, like we have mom instincts, we have God-given discernment that we know what's right for our kids. And sometimes it's the opposite of what maybe the care provider thinks. And you have to advocate for yourself and also be okay with, being labeled the non-compliant patient or just switch providers. Also, how long are you waiting in the waiting room? That's like, that's a friend of mine was like, oh, I'm always waiting like an hour. And then I see them and I see them for like 5 minutes. Yeah. And I'm like, well, like, do you feel like you get your questions answered? Do you feel heard? And she was like, no. And I was like, well, I was like, does that give you any like bad, like, how do you feel when you leave? Sure. Do you feel like, and she's like, well, I feel like he doesn't pay attention to me. I'm like, well, that says a lot. It's like, and you haven't even gotten to like, the main part of
meat and potatoes.
Yeah. So like, it's like, do what you feel is comfortable. I was like, but it's like every time I meet with like, even like the birth center or Brandy, it's always like an hour. And I'm like, and and I never wait. And it's usually at someone's like house. And so, I don't know. I have a little, like, you do want the best outcome for your baby and for you and for the experience. And sometimes there's circumstances you can't work around, but but that's really empowering to hear from someone who's seen like 300 births. So and assisted in them. Yeah. Any parting thoughts?
I think that's it. I didn't sweat too much.
You did so good. You didn't even act nervous.
I don't know. Come look at the chair. Cut that out, Dave. Cut that out.
I'm the editor on this. I won't cut it out. I can if you want me to. Dave, do you have any parting thoughts?
I don't. This was great.
Yeah.
I need to birth this baby.
I'm ready. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Wait. She's birthing the baby.
Yeah.
Well, it's a joint effort.
Yeah.
It took 2 to get here.
It did. Yeah. There is a slight pet peeve that I have that when women I hear talk about like, oh, that's the doctor that birthed my baby. It's like, or delivered my baby. It's like, you did it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't have a job if it weren't for you.
Yep.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just also really callous towards
it's okay.
Just because I have previous trauma that I'm trying to avoid.
I think that is something too that our culture is getting more and more comfortable with, is talking about the trauma surrounding medicalized care.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that,
no one
okay.
has the conversation of like, oh, well, if you're at home, like, what about an emergency? It's like, well, what about the cascade of intervention that's going to cause emotional trauma? Like, yeah, technically mom and baby are just fine. But what about the emotional trauma that like, I know women, it's been 12 years and they still can't get through their birth story without crying. And I'm like,
yes.
Like it hurts me to hear that. I'm like, that should have never happened. Like it was.
Yeah. And sometimes birth happens in a way we never imagined that it would unfold. Right. Yeah. So we have to have a little bit of space and grace in those situations. And so, I think going into birth with the perspective of, I want to have a healthy experience. I want to be emotionally intact whenever I come through this. And I want to feel heard and supported and respected as an individual. Yeah. And as a team. So, yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
You're the best.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Will you come back on to
let's do that. Let's plan to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep people on the edge of their seats.
Yeah.
Will it be next week? We never know.
We never know. And if you couldn't tell, she's had radio experience. She used to have her own radio show.
No, it wasn't mine. It was my best friend's in high school, and her dad owned the radio station.
Okay.
And he gave us a 2-hour block every Thursday night.
Wow.
Wow.
And the name. Incredible. And the name.
The Midweek Revival. There are no traces of it anywhere on the internet. So this was way before the internet was even a thing. Yeah. Like early 2000s.
Well, you're a professional.
I have a cassette tape of the radio show. That's about all we have. So,
give me that tape.
Oh, I gotta find it. I don't know where it went, but yeah, deserves to be listened to.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us today. Follow us on Instagram at @underthesun_podcast. We'd love to meet you.
Please help us out by subscribing on YouTube and leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time. Please remember this information is made available to you for informational and educational purposes only. It is in no way a substitute for medical advice.